I had worm farming, I had worm composting, I have heard vermicomposting, and I also did some research or some search on Google, and I found about 2.75 million results for worm composting, 0.9 million results for vermicomposting, and so on. Could you explain what maybe the scientific term of this treatment method is, and what the most common term is, if there is a difference?
The correct terminology from a scientific point of view, and if you want to read a lot of papers on this, and there are thousands out there with vermicomposting. It's a technical term, vermicomposting, spelled with a V, not with a W. It's not worm composting because we are not composting worms like green waste composting or farm menu composting. We are not composting worms. Actually, we are not composting. It's a fermentation, a breakdown of organic matter with the help of worms. And it's not only the worms, it's actually all the microorganisms in this environment, into this microsphere, if you like. So there are fungi, there are bacteria, protozoas, there are so many microorganisms. Actually, all these beneficial microorganisms living in the topsoil for millions of years. And a lot of these are living inside the guts of the worms, so in the stomach of the worms. But we'll talk about this later, how this all works. Another term what a lot of people use is worm farming. And worm farming is probably a more domestic term. If you want to do it at home, smaller scale, it's worm farming. And it combines both things. Vermicomposting is more focusing on organic waste management, processing the organic resources. And then we have the terminology vermiculture, which is more about breeding worms. So it's similar when you're growing these black soldier flies, where you're concentrating on producing a protein. So vermiculture is concentrating on producing earthworms for a lot of purposes. For fishing, you find literally dozens of worm farms in the Netherlands and Poland, and some in Germany actually, breeding earthworms for fishing. We can't do this in New Zealand. It's forbidden to use worms as a bait for fishing, but that's a different story. But you can use these worm tissue, the earthworms, or the worm meals. If you harvest these worms, kill them, dry them, ground them, you get a protein source which has a higher value than fish meal. And probably, I don't have any comparison to insect meal. Probably depends on the species as well. But it's very highly looked after. And especially countries like Vietnam, China, Asian countries, and India, they use a lot of these products in feeding fish, chicken, even for human consumption. It's high quality. So these are the two terms, vermiculture and vermicomposting, and worm farming. In Germany, I would use the term Vererdung mit Regenwürmern. So it's kind of stepping away from composting, because composting is actually a thermal process reaching high temperature, whereas vermicomposting is a low temperature process. So you don't create any heat, because worms wouldn't survive the heat, and you want the worms to live in there.